Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Hope you having a fantastic day wherever you are in the world. It's game 11 of the World Championship match between Jan Nepomniachtchi and Ding Liren from China. Just an incredible match so far, but I have to say, Fabi, you predicted some fireworks today. Did we see any of those in today's match?
Well, let's find out, Christian.
You're keeping us on the edge of our seat. I see what you're doing there, Fabi. All right,
Oh, yeah,
let's get straight into it.
absolutely. So Jan was playing with the white pieces, Ding with the black pieces. And to sum up the match so far, Jan is up by 1 point. He has won one more game than Ding, despite all the wins and losses they've had. So Ding is in a position where going into these last four games, and this is the 11th game, right? So there are four more games going into this game. Ding needs to win one of them, at least. I mean, if he wants just to get into a playoff.
Yes.
But with the black pieces, maybe he was looking for a more solid game because, he might be counting on winning with the white pieces. So
Yes.
Jan played e4, predictable because he's been playing this throughout the match, except for one game, which didn't garner him any advantage. So he played e4 again. Ding responded e5, also not really predictable, but not surprising as well.
Yes.
Usually Ding plays this move. Knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5. Going into Ruy Lopez, in the previous game, Ding had played knight to f6, the Berlin variation. Here he decided to revert to his usual weapon, a6. And we suspected, once his move came on the board, that it would probably be a marshal. A6, bishop a4, knight f6, short castle, and bishop e7 did indeed confirm that a marshal or anti-marshal was going to happen today. Jan played d3. He had already played this move once before in the match. In the first game of the match, he took on c6. Bishop takes c6, d takes c6, rook to e1. And that was an exciting game. For those who haven't seen it, can check out our game 1 recap. But instead, Jan played d3 in this game, which is similar to the game 5 game that he played. d3, b5, bishop b3, d6. And in that game 5, he played 8 moves c3. And he won a very important game for the match. Every win is important,
Yes.
and it was also a very good game. Instead, he decided to play a different move, but one could argue the main theoretical move in the position, move a3. The idea of the move is in some ways similar to c3. After knight a5, you want to be able to retreat the bishop, in this case to a2. After a3, white usually will continue with development with knight c3. For example, short castle, knight to c3. And this was actually a game between Jan and Ding from the candidates in the year 2020, the candidates which Jan won. And we covered that game in our pre-match analysis / recap of the players.
We did, yes.
Instead, Ding decided to play the modern move, the engine preferred move after a3, knight a5, bishop a2, and c5. And again, white plays knight c3 here. That's what Jan played. Very clear idea. He's targeting the d5 square, which was slightly weakened by the move c5. The plus side of having this pawn c5 for black is increased control of the center, especially the d4 square. And in some cases, the c pawn can advance to c4, blocking the bishop on a2. But that usually only happens under very specific circumstances because that pawn can also become a weakness on c4. Downside, knight to c3 creates control over the hole on d5, a square which cannot be attacked by any of black's pawns, only by pieces, so it becomes a bit of a weakness. Ding played bishop to e6. This is all standard theory. Obviously, black is happy to see bishop takes e6, f takes e6, because the doubled e pawns give increased control to the center, especially that d5 square, and we see here black has excellent central control. This doesn't trouble black at all.
Yeah.
So there's two main moves here. Jan played one of them. Back in 2016 against Ding, I played the other one, knight to h4. And this is kind of considered the main move. The idea, it's a bit surprising to put the knight on the rim, but here the idea is very clear. You want to play knight to f5. For example, if short castle, knight to f5, threatening knight takes e7 idea, so black takes on f5, e takes f5, and white has gotten the bishop pair. The d5 square is a bit of a weakness. This is a main theoretical position because black can play d5, fighting for that square. This is even a game Nepomniachtchi Carlsen from 2020. And white can play bishop g5 here, for example. Black plays c4. And this is a main theoretical position, which we don't need to get into the details of because objectively it's roughly equal. there's a lot of white moves here: queen e2, rook e1, queen e1, so on and so
Just
forth.
try to target the pawn structure for black, right?
Yeah, it's a fight between can black keep the bishop on a2 out of the game, or can white disturb the d5, e5 center in time? And the reality is a bit of both. Objectively, black is equalizing, but he will have to play accurately to do so.
Yeah.
So knight to h4, definitely an option, and I would have been interested to see this move. Maybe Jan would have had some interesting ideas up his sleeve there, but probably their team couldn't find real tries for white after knight h4 castle. So instead, Jan played bishop to g5. Bishop g5 is a clear indication of white's plan. The only point of putting the bishop on g5, you take on f6. Because sometimes the bishop would pin the knight. For example, if black's bishop is on a7, c5, or so on, then the idea of this move would be to pin the knight. But here, with no pin, the only idea can be to eliminate the knight from f6 and try to exploit the d5 square. So you remove a defender of that square.
Yeah.
Black will be left with a dark squared bishop. White will not be. But the dark squared bishop does not aid in defending that d5 square. So it's a strategic battle of ideas.
Yeah.
Black castled. Jan took on f6, took on f6, knight to d5. And again, a very clear strategic battle. Black has the bishop pair. The bishop on f6 is in some ways a restricted bishop, but very often will become a very important piece because if the position ever opens up, the bishop pair comes into its own. Yeah, so knight to d5 was played, and now Ding played the move g6. It's a very standard move. Basically, the bishop on f6 is a bit awkward. It doesn't want to stay there because it's being targeted. It doesn't want to go back to e7 because that would be passive. So like fianchettos the bishop g6, followed by bishop g7. If knight takes f6, black is not unhappy because queen takes f6, and white cannot exploit the d5 square anymore, and black will have a pretty much equal position. Jan played the move queen to d2. It's the main engine move, creating a very serious threat of knight takes f6, queen takes a5, winning a piece, and asking black the question, do you want to play bishop g7 or knight c6? Ding decided to play bishop g7. Knight c6 is also a fine move, after which white can, continue, for example, with the standard c3, just trying to gain control over d4. Bishop to g7, again, black usually will play this move, and knight to g5, with similar things that might happen in the game. But Ding decided to avoid that. He decided to put his bishop back on g7 immediately. And the only real dangerous idea of queen d2 is to play bishop g7, knight to g5, as Jan played. Very straightforward play. You target the bishop on e6. The question is, do you actually want to take that bishop? And most likely the answer is not necessarily right away, but perhaps in the future.
Yeah. I see ideas of f4, f5, try to disturb that bishop on e6. The problem with f4 is that obviously it opens up the dark square bishop for black. So that's kind of a double-edged sword.
Exactly. Yeah, so in the commentary, and I was doing the commentary today for chess.com, and I'll continue to do so for the rest of the match, we were mainly considering the move knight to c6 here. Knight c6, basically, the knight is targeted on a5, so you want to get it away from that potential attack of the queen on d2.
Yeah.
And here we were worried about the move f4, with the idea, if e takes f4, white now takes on e6, f e6, knight takes f4, and e6 is falling. And this is very dangerous for black.
Yeah.
And after f4, it took us quite a while to find the correct move, which was knight to e7. Because white's idea was to play f5.
Of course.
Very dangerous. And then try to push f6.
Yeah.
Knight to e7 covers that f5 move, threatens to trade on d5, and for example, it's very likely to see the following. Knight takes e7, queen takes e7, knight takes e6, f takes e6. We were analyzing the move f5 here. G takes f5. E takes f5. It looks like bishop takes e6 is a strong threat, but now d5, f takes e6, queen takes e6, and black will continue with c4. The bishop on e2 gets shut out of the game, and black is doing quite all right here.
Fantastic. Yeah, yeah.
This is what Ding
like
should have gone for. Yeah, no, that would have been fine, and this is what Ding should have gone for. Instead, he played a very dubious move, c4, the start of his difficulties.
Yeah, and as you can see, he did spend some time on this move, almost 13 minutes on this one.
And it's actually a very, very serious mistake. So knight takes e6 happened. It's clear black wants to play bishop takes d5. and you don't want to allow the doubling of your pawns. So
Yeah.
now is the time to take on e6, and then knight to e3 as was played. And now there's a threat to c4 pawn.
Yeah.
So black's pawns are very unstable. Knight on a5 is tied to defending c4. Ding played the correct move here. Yeah, so knight to e3 and d takes e4 is threatened. Black has a variety of ways to defend this pawn. Many of them will actually transpose. Ding chose to play bishop h6. It indirectly defends his pawn. If d takes c4, knight takes c4, bishop takes c4, b takes c4, then knight on e3 is pinned. So white does not win a pawn, although white may maintain a small advantage here just because black's pawn structure is a bit looser than white. You know, the double d pawns, the g pawn, the king side a bit weaker, and so on.
Yeah.
Jan played a good move, rook a to d1. Another good move was, for example, queen to e2, and I think these moves are more or less quite equivalent. So rook d1. Here Ding played an interesting move. Again, black has a number of ways to defend the c4 pawn, but there's also the weakness of the d6 pawn.
Yeah.
Ding recognized that white's main idea is to play d takes c4, and he played rook to b8, with the idea that if d takes c4, then the rook on b8 will activate once the b file opens and gain counterplay against the b2 pawn.
Yeah.
And here, Jan had a very nice position if he had made the move queen to e2. Clear idea, you break the pin on the knight, and so you open up the threat of d takes c4 in many positions.
Yeah.
This kind of suggests black should play bishop takes e3 here. And after queen takes e3, and I should say f takes e3 is also an interesting move, but queen takes e3 looks very logical. White has quite a nice advantage. The basis of the advantage is simply a better pawn structure, more compact, a bishop which, if it gets active, will be very dangerous in this position, and just a more solid, safe position. This was a no-risk way to play for a slight advantage.
Yeah.
Not a great advantage, but not one that you really want to defend for a long time.
It just feels like white has all the trumps in the position. He can open up the position on the queen side by exchanging on c4, then queen to c3, target the knight on a5. He can also try to open up the position on the king side with f4, as well as in the center if you try to push the move d4. Of course, d4, you know, it's a bit risky because you leave the bishop on a2 sort of closed. But f4, d takes c4, it just seems like white has all the time in the world, while also having a much safer king on g1 compared to the king on g8. If the bishop on a2 opens up with that king on g8, it's pretty much game over.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And basically, black does not have a clear way forward and needs to wait for white to open up the position.
Yeah.
D takes e4.
Yeah.
For example, white can play king g7. Black can play king g7.
Mm-hmm.
Black can play, for example, queen to c7. Let's say queen c7.
Yeah.
Now we simply play dc4.
Mm-hmm.
And if bc4, then b4 comes. Take, and the position becomes very dangerous after white achieves b4 again.
Yeah.
If knight takes c4, now white takes, pawn takes, not to drop the d6 pawn. And again, a move like b4, black should probably trade pawns, otherwise white will have this very dangerous, pawn majority on the a and b files compared to black's a pawn.
Yeah.
C takes b3, c takes b3. Now, why would white be better in a position with equal material? Well, the thing is that white can try to push forward with b4, play on the queen side, and if black ever tries to relieve himself of the weakness of the d6 pawn with d5, it will lead to more weaknesses. Then suddenly d pawn will be weak, the e pawn will be weak, and so on.
Yeah.
And so white is better here because the plan is just to double rooks and try to attack that weak d pawn. And of course, the king safety, as you pointed out, is an issue because black's king has less pawns around it, so it becomes a bit more of a weakness than white's king.
Yeah.
If queen to b6 here, white can just move the queen somewhere. For example, queen to g5, and if queen takes b3, rook takes c6, and it's not like white wins necessarily, but it's the start of a long and unpleasant defensive task for black.
It's one of those nagging pressures in which the position never gets better, right? It's just a long-term slight advantage. If you make inaccuracies along the way, you're going to get busted. So it's a very unpleasant position to try to defend.
Yeah, exactly. It's just not fun.
Yeah.
And one variation I pointed out in the commentary after queen e2 was if black plays queen to c7, trying to avoid bishop takes e3.
Yeah.
First of all, white can play d takes c4, and then probably black will play bishop takes c3 anyway. But sometimes there are even ideas of h4, and you just want to try to soften up that king side a little bit with h5 at some opportune moment. Again, black is not equalizing the position concretely, and therefore is just a bit worse. And I don't know why Jan did not go for this, because it's completely safe, unpleasant, and you can bail out at any moment. Like, we saw those positions with the heavy pieces. You know, white, even if white never proves an advantage, even if white just makes a draw, it's still, your king is safe. You're under no danger of ever becoming worse.
Something
this is
to
just,
play with.
Yeah, I think just risk-free. I mean, you could play queen e2, very practical, and see where it goes from there.
Especially in a match in which both of these players have had to deal with a lot of tension, and we know that the prolonged exposure, let's say, to tension makes you prone to making mistakes. So this is the exact type of advantage that you want to have going into the final few rounds.
I think it would have been unpleasant, and I don't know what the winning chances for white are there, but it would have been an unpleasant position for Ding to hold on to.
Yeah.
Instead, Jan played d takes c4. This forces a lot of exchanges. Knight takes c4, bishop takes c4, b takes c4. Now, the point of rook b8 is becoming clear. The rook on b8 attacks the pawn on b2. And the problem if queen c3 is that black is in time to take on e3. And you don't really want to play fe3 because then you spoil your structure, and queen takes e3 allows rook takes b2.
Yeah.
That's why Jan took on d6. Now we saw a mass exodus of pieces. Take on d6, rook d6, bishop e3, fe3, rook f1, king f1, rook takes b2. Not only is that pawn falling, but c2 is also falling.
Yeah.
Of course, black's pawns are also falling. So Jan took on e6, take on c2, take on a6. White is up a pawn. Rook to a2 came. Now black has the idea of c3, c2, so Jan played rook c6. Rook takes a3, rook takes c4. Rook takes e3. Material equality is established, but white can play king f2, kicking the rook away, rook to a3, and then rook c5, attacking the e5 pawn. And there's no way to defend it. So was Ding in trouble here? Well, now he played a few accurate moves. Rook to a2, king f3, rook a3. The king has nowhere to run to except to g4. Rook to a2 and king to h3 to escape the checks.
With g3,
right? Rook
after
a3,
rook to a3, yeah.
Here, Ding found an accurate way, and we have to say black does have a number of ways to reach a draw here, because 3 against 2 is in general a drawn rook endgame, but it's best to try to simplify it as quickly as possible. So he played rook to e2, rook takes e5, and king f7. The idea is king f6, rook e8, king f7, chasing the rook away or making a repetition.
Yeah.
King to g3, king to f6, rook e8, king f7. And now Jan could have played rook to h8.
King to g7.
King g7, king f3 keeps the 3 against 2. I think he probably would have taken on e4, rook h7, king to f6, or indeed king anywhere. And 2 against 1. We already saw this in the previous game with the opposite colors, right? Ding playing 2 against 1, which quickly became 1 pawn alone. Instead, Jan decided not even to go for that. He played rook e5, king f6, rook e8. And the reason why he didn't want to play 2 against 1 is that probably these guys are tired, and they recognize, of course, that you can play 2 against 1 as long as you want, but you're almost never, ever going to win unless your opponent has like some sort of health emergency.
Yeah.
Which usually we don't want to count on to win games.
Yeah. No.
So
let's say the basicness or easiness of this game is quite obviously reflected in their time spent as well. Both of these players finished with more than 1 hour on their clocks, and they haven't made the second time control. So I would say it was quite an easy day at the office for both Jan, by design for Jan. I don't think at this point he's looking to take any unnecessary risks. He knows that most likely if he does defend with the black pieces, he has a couple of games to try to defend. His preparation is tip-top shape. So he's been going through his repertoire throughout the match. So definitely right now his knowledge is cemented, ready to go and defend with the black pieces for the next couple of games. And for Ding, and we've seen Ding not necessarily not be prepared, but we noticed that his preparation is not necessarily at the same level as Jan's, right? At some point, he risks to not have enough weapons remaining for the last few rounds. Did you feel the same way when you played the long match? Were you running out of ideas towards the end of the match? Tell us about your experience.
I don't think so, because we had quite an abundance of ideas in this complex 95 Sveshnikov, and they were the sort of ideas that you're never really comfortable with because it's too complex, and computers at the time were not strong enough to understand the position.
Yeah.
And we were basically like, I mean, it was a different world back then, 2018, analyzing with like very, very weak version of Leela that would constantly blunder pieces, and Stockfish that had no idea what was going on in the position and was very misleading. So yeah, it was completely different, I think, for them as well. Like neither of our sides could fully get to the bottom of this Sveshnikov with 95, and that's why chess has just changed. Like you could have those long theoretical debates in the past, and now you just can't because computers are too strong and give the answer too quickly.
Yeah.
And so the question is more of like trying to find some tries that are practical tries. Like, for example, we see Jan's preparation today. I mean, he's going for equal positions where he feels like there's some practical chances to outplay his opponent.
Yeah.
He's not showing some kind of new paths in the Marshall or in the Berlin. I mean, okay, he showed a sort of new path in the first game in the anti-Marshall, but since then it's been kind of standard stuff. They know their lines well.
Yeah.
It seems, but then they get a position and they have to play, and this is the recognition that even if you know your lines well, you get an equal position, but still it's a tough fight. That's basically what they're going for. Now, has Ding started to run out of ideas? I think so, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think the last game is very indicative of that because it was poorly prepared, and that is, that's usually an indication that it's been prepared during the tournament, not before the tournament, not before the match, let's say. And probably this is why Jan was happy with the draw today. I think that was his pre-game strategy, was basically, unless you get like a huge advantage out of the opening, just kind of clean it up, make a draw. I think it's like knowing that Queen E2 is so nice for white, I think it's not a great strategy, but it still might work quite well. I mean, it could work excellently. He could, just get 1.5 out of the remaining 3 games, or even win a game, and it looks like a genius strategy. But considering it was risk-free, and I don't think he had any chance of losing, really, any realistic chance if he played Queen E2, and he had some chance of winning, maybe whatever you want to say, 20%, I don't know, 15%, 30%, we can name numbers all day long, but he had some chance of winning. Yeah, I think it's just good equity, right? Good EV, let's say.
No, it feels like at this point perhaps Jan is just more interested to save energy and save mental resilience reservoirs, things of that nature. He's not trying to take any unnecessary risks. Tomorrow we have a rest day. Game 12 coming up on the 26th of April. That's going to be, in my opinion, probably the crucial game, because if Ding doesn't win, I mean, he's going to most likely be, that in game 13, Jan is going to kill the game with the white pieces and just have to defend in the last game for the title. So you don't want to be in that situation. I think Ding Liren has to go. He has a rest day ahead of himself. He needs to get ready and throw the gauntlet in game 12. Just come up with some very aggressive preparation. Take Jan into unclear, muddy waters. Risk, because if you go that path, you're probably going to risk losing that game as well. You have to take those type of unnecessary risks and try to get a game. Ding Liren entering must-win territory.
Yeah, I think next game is already, like, let's say 50, 75% of a must-win. And if he doesn't win, I don't think he'll win with the black pieces after that, although I think he should try at that point. Then the last game is obviously 100% must win. And we'll see. I just think that he needs his team to have some sort of very valuable idea for the rest day. They need to start working on some very valuable idea. They've had a while. They kind of know what Jan's directions are in the openings, right? Reverse Sicilian, an option, Nimzo, an option. They know they could probably get Reverse Sicilian or Nimzo, and I don't think Jan will start deviating, because deviating at this stage in the match takes a lot of nervous energy away from you, and I don't think Jan, since he's had no like tremendous opening problems recently, unless you want to count the Nimzo game where it was kind of unclear from the opening and eventually he got outplayed. Unless you count that, then he has no real reason to deviate from his opening. So Ding basically, I see two directions, unless he decides to go Catalan, which I think would not be a smart decision at this stage in the match. Something in the Reverse Sicilian. I think it's very likely they'll search for something there, or something in the Nimzo. Two possibilities that I'm seeing. Everything else just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
Perfect. Fabi, I'll see you in a couple of days. We're actually going to be on the same time zone, or at least close enough. I'm coming to Europe. So yeah, I'll see you in a couple of days in the next video.
Yeah, see you guys all in the next video, next game of the World Championship match.
See you guys. Bye-bye.